Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our virtual Meet the Expert workshop. My name is Stefan, and I'm part of the My World of Work Live team here at Skills Development Scotland. My World of Work Live is about helping you to understand future careers and what skills these careers may require. So in today's session, we're going to cover a quick overview of planning within the construction sector. We're going to have a look at some of the opportunities within the sector today. I'm then going to introduce you to Rhiannon and Moylan from Montagu, and then we'll also allow you throughout to ask questions. This week is Scottish Apprenticeship Week as well, an opportunity to celebrate apprenticeships in Scotland and to share the value they have for individuals, employers and the economy. As you can imagine, all the activity for the week this year is virtual, with people and businesses right across Scotland sharing photos, films and stories, so you can have a look at the other activity by searching for #ScotApprenticeshipWeek21. I would like to encourage you to get involved as much as possible today, so please use the question and answer section to ask whatever questions you would like, and we'll be able to get these through to Rhiannon. I would just like to let you know that today's session, it is being recorded. It's being recorded because it is in the public interest for us to do so. It's also being recorded so that young people who could not make it today can still access the resources. It will be made available on the My World of Work YouTube channel for everyone. So if you've maybe missed something today as well and you would like to go back over it, you can see that on the My World of Work YouTube channel. Please don't worry, everything that you do ask today can be anonymous, so you can choose that option when you're clicking the question into the box. As you may know by now, it is currently Scottish Apprenticeship Week. There are over 100 different types of Scottish apprenticeships available. More than 12,000 employers are involved. Benefits of having an apprenticeship or taking part in an apprenticeship is productivity, improved staff morale, improved image within the sector. And the reasons for employers backing apprenticeships as well may include provide young people with the opportunity to train workers in core skills, so that closes some of the skills gaps and shortages that we always discuss, and it provides industry experience as well. Let's quickly have a look at some of the information for planning rules within the construction sector, and we'll come on then to speaking to Rhiannon. So you've got some labour market information there. Jobs as a town planner from 2020 to 2025 is forecast to grow by 3.4%. The sector is forecast to grow also up to 2030, which is greater than the overall Scottish economy. However, the absolute numbers are still uncertain, estimation of 130 additional planners. The sector and profession faces some significant short to medium term demographic challenges, with the likes of an ageing workforce coupled with the lack of younger workers and graduates entering the sector. Evidence also identifies that over the next 10 to 15 years, the planning sector will have a demand for an additional 680 to 730 entrants into the sector. Now, just to give you a bit of an insight into the expected salaries, which again, Rhiannon could touch on a bit more later on. The expected salary for a town planner can vary, but it varies based on experience. So newly trained town planners can earn between 20,000 to 35,000. Trained town planners with some experience can earn between 35 to 40,000, and senior or principal town planners can earn in excess of 45,000. Whilst there are no specific town planning apprenticeships currently, there are a few apprenticeship routes that you could lead into nicely for the town planning area. So you've got modern apprenticeship in construction technical, and there's also a graduate apprenticeship in construction and the built environment. Now the graduate apprenticeship, you would learn things such as project and delivery management. You would gain competence in the valuation of land and property, understanding of appropriate solutions around the principles of design and technology. You would also learn and understand and apply relevant laws, describe building standards, regulations and their consequences across the sector. You could also gain an insight into the knowledge of business management concepts such as data management, business finance and business strategies. The ability to take responsibility for obligations for things as well, like health and safety, welfare, environment, and quality issues. Careers that this could typically lead you into would be things like town planning, building surveying, construction management, facilities management, planning and development, property surveying, and so on. So hopefully this gives you a bit of an insight into what Scotland is going to need in terms of skilled people within the construction sector going forward. I'm now going to introduce you to Rhiannon Moylan, who will be able to give you lots more detail about what she does in her role.
Hi there, my name's Rhiannon Moylan and I am a town planner. I think a lot of you might be wondering, what does a town planner do? Well, it's pretty straightforward, I suppose. We plan towns. I think one of the most interesting parts of it for me is the scales that could mean. So that could be something as small as an extension on your house, all the way up to planning a whole new town to meet the needs of our changing populations. So how did I get into planning? It was I probably had a pretty conventional route compared to a lot of people. It's something I really enjoyed geography at school. And my sister had said to me, "Oh, you would probably like planning," and I hadn't heard of it before until she mentioned it. So I looked it up, found a course on planning, and I thought, yeah, actually, I would quite like that. And I went to university and studied town planning. I originally did it as I went into it as a joint honours with geography as well as town planning, but kind of partway through the course I felt, no, do you know what, planning's the one for me. So I went straight ahead and got the 4-year undergraduate degree in town planning. After that, I had to do 2 years work experience and sit an exam, and it was a written submission to become a chartered town planner. So that's just kind of giving you that kind of professional role that you get from that status. So that's how I got into planning. Pretty straightforward compared to a lot of other people's routes. I know that a lot of people do geography first and then do master's degrees in planning, and there's loads of different ways you can get into it, which we can touch on in a bit more detail if anyone has any specific questions. But to think kind of what I do in my day-to-day job. So at the minute I work in consultancy. So in planning, you could either be kind of private sector or public sector or third voluntary sector. So just now I am in the private sector. So I work for developers, landowners, a whole range of different clients to try and get planning permission for sites and to encourage development and growth. So at the minute, a big part of my job is looking at plans and proposals and submitting them to the council for planning permission. So that could be things like new housing developments, new office buildings. It's a really exciting area to work in, I have to say, and there's loads of change and no day is the same. But as I said, there's different areas you can work in planning, and prior to this job I actually worked in the public sector, so working for the local authority. I actually did 2 different jobs. So one of them was plan making, which is it's really exciting as well because you get to look really far forward into the future. So you look at different statistics and demographics and loads of different data sets to see what is happening in a place and how is that going to grow, and how much housing do you need, how much employment land do you need, and where is the best place for that. So it is essentially planning towns. It's very focused, map-based, and it's just quite interesting to get out there and do it and to think to the future. So that was one role I had, and then the other side is kind of the other side of it. So that's called the development management side. And through that, you assess the applications. So just now in the job I'm in, I submit applications to the council, but previously I used to look at the applications and decide whether or not they were suitable. So in doing that, you can compare them to the plan that the plan makers make and see if it all fits in with the overall vision for a town, whether or not there'll be any bad impacts on neighbours, whether or not there's enough schools in the area, things like that, just to assess whether or not the development is really suitable for the location. But overall, it's a job where there's lots of opportunity. There's lots of different kind of niche areas and specialisms you can get involved in, and it's actually a really exciting job. And it's one where no day really is the same. So there's a lot of opportunities in it, and it's definitely one of those things I would say if you've got any interests or questions or thoughts about it, just please do let me know, and I'll do my best to answer your questions today. I'll pass back to Stefan just now.
Rhiannon, thank you. Really good insight there into the sector, and Also, I think it's quite important you highlighting how you got in as well. So using the networks that we speak about all the time through your sisters. So really, really important. We do have a number of questions coming in there, Rhiannon. The first question that is being asked, what would you say is the favourite thing about your job?
Favourite thing? So for me, it's getting involved in communities. So through some of the work I've done before for Planning Aid for Scotland, we get really involved in what's called a charrette, which is usually a community-led plan for the future development of the area. So you do things like meetings in town halls and encourage everyone from the community to drop in, to tell us what their thoughts and views are for the area and what they'd like to see. And eventually you pull that all into a plan which is used by the planners to inform the kind of statutory plans, the big important ones. So it's that's really interesting, and it's really important that you listen to what the community say, because so often they know more than you do, flying in from another town or city. So I think that's really interesting for me, and I really enjoy getting to know how a place works. And the kind of other side from that is actually getting involved with schools. And I think one of the things that's often not appreciated is that, like, it's the school kids that are going to be using the space in the future, and they know what they want out of a place, and they're looking forward a lot more than I think often people just think in the now. So it's always good to get that extra perspective and that slightly different thought of it, of, oh, well, what about, we're not going to use cars in 10 years time, so how are you going to plan for that? So I think it's really interesting to just hear that spectrum of views and opinions, and it's a bit of a change from every day sitting at your desk. You get to go out and have a bit more of an adventure, I would say.
Definitely. Rhiannon, I think this next question goes hand in hand. What would you say the most challenging things are about your job?
To be honest, I would also say it's dealing with communities and people. So that's the kind of flip side. So it's very much a kind of people focused job, because you're either working for your clients or you're working for the council, where really the people and the public, they are your client, they are your customer. So no matter what you're doing, you're trying to make a decision or put forward a proposal that's essentially in the public interest and that works well for everyone. And there's always a bit of a kind of a fear around development, or a bit of hesitancy that, oh no, what about these houses, will ruin my view, or will they cause flooding, or will this, and there's just a bit of uncertainty. So I think that can be quite challenging sometimes to kind of show people the positives to development, because so often you have that negative reaction. So that can be quite challenging, and it can be quite confrontational sometimes, especially when there's neighbour disputes. But on the whole, it's probably the best part in the same way, because you get to kind of not talk someone round. Obviously, you're not changing their viewpoint entirely, but you can let them see the different side to it as well, and think, oh well, maybe if those houses are there, it'll make the shop have better business and they won't lose the shop, and just trying to see both sides of the proposal. I think that's always interesting and definitely challenging, but definitely the most worthwhile part for me.
Excellent. I think, Rhiannon, obviously with every job there is the challenges as well. So what university, Rhiannon, did you go to, and are there many universities out there that offer this type of course?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I went to University of Dundee, and I did a 4-year undergraduate course, and that's fully accredited by the RTPI, so that's the Royal Town Planning Institute. And to become a chartered member of the RTPI, you have to have the right qualifications, and one of them is an accredited degree. So I did the 4-year undergraduate at Dundee University, but Heriot Watt also do a 4-year undergraduate course. And then Heriot Watt, Dundee and Glasgow universities all do 1-year master courses as well. So there are different options, but there is only 3 accredited planning schools in Scotland. But you can do other degrees first and then do a master's in planning as well. So like, so say you really love geography or some other kind of, there's probably loads of options you could do actually as your kind of undergrad course, and then go in and specialise in planning at the master's level to get that accredited course. But yeah, I went to Dundee and did the 4-year undergraduate course.
Yeah, and I think it's important to obviously highlight as well the apprenticeship route there, Rhiannon. Whilst not taking you directly into town planning straight away, there's options there like we had spoke about earlier on. So construction, the built environment, learning all these type of skills and learning about these things that could be applied into a town planning role. So it could be then just going on and getting that final qualification at a university if you choose to do so, really. One of the other questions, Rhiannon, coming in there is, do you think that smart homes and 5G will feature heavily in your job in the future?
Yeah, and actually it's something that kind of already is to an extent. Things like how technology and data can change the way we plan for places is a big thing. One of the main things obviously being cars and the change in car use, but even things like how we consult people, how do we get information out? Should there be things like if you're in an area, can you open an app and it'll show you what developments are going on in the area, and you can swipe right or left depending on whether or not you like it. And things like that in terms of how technology is changing the process are always really exciting to see. In terms of smart homes and smart technology, we're seeing loads of that coming through from looking specifically at renewables and different energy forms and how we can make sure houses that are being built are more sustainable and meet the needs of the future population, and also that they're going to last a long time and not use too many resources. So in that sense, yes, in terms of things like clap on, clap off lights and things, that's not really a planning issue. That's probably more building standards, and I also realise clap on, clap lights isn't new technology, but those kinds of in-house specs, that's more specific to building standards rather than planning. Planning's a bit bigger picture in that case. Does that make sense, Stefan?
Yeah, what type of environmental factors do you have to consider when planning?
Yeah, so this is actually a huge one. So I think one of the things about planning is that you can specialise in different areas. So you can specialise in coastal planning and flood risk planning, and there's loads of different kind of niche subjects that you can get involved in and really develop that specialist role. In terms of a kind of day-to-day, the big ones are obviously things like flooding. I think you've heard about it on the press about development in the floodplain and things like that. So we have to be specific. We have to hire consultants really to do specific modelling to see what areas flood, how susceptible is it to flooding. Is there different things that could be put here? So maybe it floods, but does that mean it'd be okay for a storage unit or something? So you need to consider things like that. We'll also look at ecology, what animals are there, what species are there, what habitats, and then right down to really technical things like, is there how stable is the soil, where are the areas for ground contamination, is there any peat, any special soils that we have to be aware of? So there's loads of different areas to that which we have to really carefully consider, because I think that's the whole thing about planning. It has to be taken on balance in a well-rounded view, and you have to consider all the different wee bits that make up a place.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's a lot more to consider than what even I had anticipated. So really, really good, Rhiannon. Rhiannon, you're based in Glasgow. Do you only plan for Glasgow, or do you get to travel about? And
no, you get well. I get to travel about in my current job for sure. If you work for a local authority, you would be working just in that local authority. But if you work for a consultancy, chances are you'll be planning across the whole of the UK. So just now, I have planning applications in Wales, England, Scotland, and I'm preparing one for Northern Ireland. So yeah, it's definitely quite broad based, and it's good because you often get to go on site visits, so you get to see places, which is always really exciting.
And Rhiannon, do you get to plan home layouts, or is it just like estates that you would plan?
It would just be, so we wouldn't, generally you don't actually need planning permission to change the inside of layout of your house unless it's a listed building. So that's not something we would usually get too involved in planning. And that's usually more kind of architects or the surveyors. We would do more, like plots and estates or extensions to houses. So it's more, the government recently introduced, I say recently, it's a good few years ago now, increased permitted development rights, which gave people more right to do things to change their personal house, so long as it didn't impact their neighbours. So that's the kind of things we are looking at more in terms of, will that extension overshadow the neighbour's garden? Will it block daylight in their windows? So it's things more to do with the neighbouring property's amenity rather than kind of how does the internal layout work? Where do the plug sockets go? Should there be a wall here? Is it load bearing? That's not something we get involved in the day-to-day, and it's something where a surveyor or an architect has more expertise than we would probably only be concerned if it was a LSD building, in which case we'd be wondering, is there a nice ceiling cornice or a fireplace in there, because we want to keep those historic features.
And it sounds like there's a lot of fine details to think through in your job role as well, Rhiannon. Rhiannon, one of the other questions that has come in is, do you feel at this point in your career you would do anything differently if you were to go back and start your career?
To be honest, no. I think I graduated in 2014, so I've been planning for nearly 7 years now, and I've had 3 different jobs, because it kind of from the get-go I've always said to myself, planning's so broad and there's so many different areas you can get involved in. I didn't really want to narrow myself down to one. I wanted to go ahead and try each one. So I've worked in development planning, which is that kind of planning towns and creating spaces and looking at the maps and where things are going to grow and where you need land for housing. I've done the development management side of it, which is handling applications and assessing them and seeing whether or not there's any technical issues. Is it in line with the plan? Will it be nice? Will it impact the amenity of the area? Will it look nice? Essentially, is a big part as well. So I've done that side, and now I'm kind of going right back to the beginning almost, and working with developers and landowners and saying, actually, you could build housing here. If we were to do housing here, this is how we should do it. We'll get involved with the architects, we'll give advice on what we think the planning issues might be, and we try and preempt them so that we can then go to the council and say, look, this is our plan and it's awesome and this is why you should approve it. So yeah, I feel like I've kind of gone full circle, and no, I don't have any regrets so far.
Oh, that's great, and it sounds like you kept your options open quite as long as you could, really, to make a decision.
Yeah. And I would definitely say something that's quite easy to do with planning, because there are so many different areas you can get involved in, so many different specialisms, and I've not even touched on most of them. So in that sense, it is a really good career, that it's quite broad.
So Rhiannon, what subjects would you recommend a young person to do at school?
I don't think there's any required ones. So it's not like if you were doing geography or something, you would have to have geography. But I would probably recommend geography. I don't know if it's the same now, but when I did my advanced higher in geography, there was a question that was based around, you've got a map, you need to put a school or a building or a tourism centre. Where would you put it on this map and why? And essentially that is planning. And I think a lot of the stuff you do in geography has really good links to planning, so I'd probably suggest that. But to be honest, I think one of the things with planning is that there's either quite a sciencey technical side, or there's quite a population, modern studies, human environment side to it as well. So I think it really depends, and there's quite a lot of flexibility there in terms of what subjects you choose, but I don't think there's any specific requirements for certain subjects to get into the courses. I think it's more just generally grades based. But I would suggest probably in geography and English would be my go-tos, I think.
Brilliant. Rhiannon, what would you say has been the biggest project to date that you have been working on or part of?
So currently Montagu Evans are working on a proposal in Glasgow, which is for a new primarily residential development, and it's probably the biggest one to date in terms of height and scale. But actually, it's not always the big things that are the most exciting or the most interesting. I suppose it depends on your area of interest, but it can be proposals for 400 or 500 homes on a greenfield site, or it could be new industrial units or what have you. But for me, I always think the more exciting ones are always the wee smaller ones. It's a bit kind of fiddlier, and it's thinking about more in the detail oftentimes. So I think one of my favourite projects are almost always linked to historic buildings, and it's how do we convert these and bring them back into use, while kind of maintaining the historic features and the overall design of the building. I always find them more interesting rather than the big fancy high-rise developments. So.
Okay. Rhiannon, somebody has asked there as well, quite an interesting question. Is the Scottish town planning qualification transferable abroad, as they would like to consider moving to Europe in the future?
Yeah, so the town, because the degrees are accredited by the RTPI, which is the Royal Town Planning Institute, yeah, the RTI is quite widely recognised worldwide. I think for some places, I can't tell you for sure in Europe, but I'm pretty sure in New Zealand and Australia they recognise it, but you maybe just need to top up to specialise in their laws. It's a kind of top up course, but generally the principles and the theory that you learn is applicable elsewhere. Actually, we did a module in university on different kind of European spatial planning modules, so it's definitely something where you learn a lot, and because it's got that kind of accreditation by the RTI, it's quite widely recognised.
And I'd imagine, Rhiannon, that the skills that you gain throughout that sector, you could transfer those quite easily into a role in any country, really.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Rhiannon, what type of skills would you say you rely on quite a lot for your role?
To be honest, there's loads. There's probably the more obvious ones, the project management ones, time management, making sure an application goes in when the client wants it, keeping everything on track and it goes smoothly. We need to be really organised a lot of the time because it's pulling stuff together, it's coordinating different teams, getting information from different sources and pulling that all into one pack. You also need to be quite analytical, I would say, and be able to think with the critical mind to look at a problem and try and find a solution is one of the big things. So definitely a lot of problem solving. But then also some slightly more practical skills like negotiation skills and being able to have constructive conversations with people and know that there'll be some elements of give and take to make sure that the proposal is the best for the place. So I think they're probably the big ones. So organisation, time management, problem solving and negotiation. I think they would be kind of key skills I would pull out.
Thank you, Rhiannon. We're getting loads of interesting questions in today, which is absolutely fantastic. The next question, do you have to do field work and soil sampling, or do contractors do that?
Yeah, so more technical things like soil sampling we wouldn't have to do, but we do have to do field work in that we have to go out onto site. So if you had a planning application for I'll use a generic 100 homes on the edge of a town, you would have to go out to that site to see, is there any hills that might mean houses are really high up and look down on other houses? Is there any trees that have maybe been missed off the plans that you want to make sure are kept? How does the access look into that site? Have the transport assessment shown any issues with that? So you would go out and you would look at the site so you can really assess the proposal. You would go out with your plans and your maps and your drawings, try and visualise what it's going to look like and check to see if there's going to be any problems or where you envision there might be a problem or a conflict. So you do often have to go out on site to check that. That's one of the challenging things about COVID is that it's been quite hard to go out and do site visits, and there's only so much you can do with Google Maps because you don't get a good view on topography and things like that. But while we don't take samples very often because we're not technically specialist in that type of area, you do have to go out on site, even for small things like house extensions. That's one of the things where you actually really do need to go out on site so you can see where the neighbours' windows are and where there'll be an impact. So yeah, actually in my old job at Glasgow Council, I was out on site once a week, so it was quite regular getting out your office as well.
Brilliant. And Rhiannon, you touched on this there a bit already, but how would you say COVID has it affected your job role really?
Not massively, to be honest. So I can only really speak for myself and the company that I work with just now. Montagu have been really great. We have all our IT setups and things, so we can work from home quite efficiently. Most things are done online now anyway, in terms of actually submitting the application and the drawings and things. They're all online, so it's all fairly straightforward. The only thing that is a bit difficult is you can't get out on site, and it's not as easy to meet with people, meet with communities. But we've actually put quite a lot of work into making sure that we can do virtual kind of community consultation events, so doing that through Zoom. And there's been a bit of a shift in terms of moving stuff online, which it was a wee bit of a learning curve, but actually it has all been fine. And I think as a sector has proved to be quite resilient, and I know that the figures are showing that the number of planning applications being submitted, it's not falling. So yeah, I think it's definitely something we can see future growth in, and I wouldn't have said that the impact from COVID has been hugely significant, at least in my role, but I do know that different authorities and things have struggled where they've maybe not had the right IT setups and things, or the systems haven't worked very well, but the actual profession hasn't been hugely impacted. It's still something that can keep going.
Brilliant. Rhiannon, I've got two more questions for you just before we finish up the session for today. The next question, what is Planning Aid?
Planning Aid. So Planning Aid is it's a voluntary organisation, and it's a charity really, and they give free impartial planning advice. So I'm a volunteer in the advice service, so if your neighbour was building an extension and you wanted to object but you didn't know how, you would contact PAS and they would be able to help you out. Or if you had any planning issue, really, PAS can help you out as part of their advice service. But they also arrange different kind of community consultation events, and they work with community councils and different community groups to basically let them know a bit more about planning, try and help them out with different initiatives and activities. And they're really kind of a go-between, really, between the public sector and the private sector. So they're a voluntary charity organisation, probably similar to like Legal Aid that you've maybe heard about, that gives free legal advice. It's like that, but for planning.
Rhiannon, final question for today. Do you have to work weekends, or is it just like a 9-to-5 job?
It's largely 9 to 5. Sometimes you'd have to work a weekend or an evening if you were doing a consultation event, because you need to work hours that people can go to if they work 9 to 5. So there's the odd occasion where you maybe have to do an evening or a Saturday if there's a long running consultation event. But to be honest, they are few and far between. It is pretty much a 9 to 5 type job.
Brilliant, Rhiannon. One of the other questions that was asked was about apprenticeships. So like I had mentioned earlier in regards to the apprenticeships, there's no direct apprenticeship in Scotland yet for going straight into town planning, but you do have a few options there in likes to the modern apprenticeship, construction technical, and you've also got a graduate apprenticeship in the construction and built environments, which you can learn quite a lot of relevant skills to take forward into something like town planning.
Yeah, unfortunately it's not something we have yet in Scotland, but it is something they're looking into and hoping that it would help to meet the skills gaps by introducing an apprenticeship. But we don't have one yet, but as you said, there's opportunities to learn it through different ways and get those skills, so that then you just maybe have to do your top up to get your accreditation or learn through practice.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Rhiannon. So there you have it, folks. There's obviously something in the pipeline there, so just keep an eye out. That might become available at some stage down the line. To find out more about the likes of town planning and similar careers, you can visit My World of Work. So it's www.myworldofwork.co.uk. You'll find lots of information there that can help you make choices about your career. And if you need some further inspiration on maybe what you would like to do, to get some ideas on what you could potentially do, you can have a look at My World of Work. There's loads of tools on My World of Work as well that can help you explore profiles that suit you as a person and explore your strengths as well. If you would like to learn more about apprenticeships in Scotland, check out apprenticeships.scot. And for information on digital careers, look at digitalworld.net. You could also speak to your school careers advisor, as they will have a lot more information and guidance for you, so they could support you in terms of going away, having a look, and maybe coming back and figuring out if this is the type of career you would like to consider. Just to make you aware, we do have more virtual expert sessions coming up as part of Scottish Apprenticeship Week, the week where we will have one each day. Check out our social media channels for links to join those live sessions. And that's us come to the end of the session today. Firstly, I would like to say a massive thank you to Rhiannon for taking the time to join us and providing an insight into her job role and the planning area within the construction sector. I personally found it really interesting, and I hope that you've found it really interesting as well. I would also just like to take this opportunity to say a massive thank you to everybody that has joined us today. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the session, it has been recorded. So if you've maybe missed something or would like to go back over something again, you can do so as many times as you want at a later date. Just have a look at the videos when they get uploaded onto the My World of Work YouTube channel. This may take about a week before they become available, but there's already an array of videos up there that you can start having a look at.